Have you ever thought about how C major and A minor have exactly the same notes and yet sound radically different? If not, then this is the video for you, because we're talking about a very important and fundamental music theory concept that you probably don't understand or haven't really thought much about, but is super important. So this important fundamental music theory concept really comes down to understanding that yes, a subset of notes is important for keys and modes and helps to give them an identity and a sound. But really, what might be even more important is actually what the tonic is, not actually the subset of notes itself. So first, you probably understand that all keys and modes are a subset of notes. If you have C major, for example, you have the notes C, D, E, F, G, A, B, or if you have F major, you have F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E. And while you may not have known those specifically, you probably do understand that different keys and modes utilize only certain notes and actually exclude some other notes. And you may also be familiar with the concept of a relative minor, how C major has a relative minor of A minor, and how F major has a relative minor of D minor. And if you didn't know, what a relative minor is essentially just a minor key that actually shares the exact same set of notes as the major key. So going back to C major, we established C major is C, D, E, F, G, A, B. Very easy, no sharps or flats. And A minor is actually that exact same subset of notes, the C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. The only difference is what we treat as the tonic. And this gets me to the main point of this video, which is that we tend to overemphasize the importance of the subset of notes and way underemphasize the importance of the tonic. Just for frame of reference, if we take C major, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A minor, or otherwise known as A Aeolian, and then B Locrian, all of those, which have radically different sounds, we all understand that a song in a minor key versus a major key sounds very different. If major to minor sounds different, Phrygian is even more different because Phrygian is even darker sounding than minor. And then taking Lydian, Lydian is even more different from minor than major is because Lydian is even more bright and ethereal sounding. So all of these totally different sounds come from the exact same subset of notes. The only difference is which note we're treating as the tonic. If we play the exact same notes, if we improvise with our right hand on a keyboard, for example, just utilizing all the notes of C major, and then in our left hand we just hit C over and over again, then it will sound like C major, and it will sound relatively bright and cheery probably. But if we actually change our left hand to play instead an E in the bass instead of a C in the bass, the sound in the character will become completely different because now we're emphasizing the E as if it is the tonic. So now it will start to sound like E Phrygian, even though the notes we're playing in our right hand and overall the subset of notes we're using haven't changed at all. So if we compare the difference between C major and E Phrygian, which again share the exact same subset of notes, to C major and C sharp major, which share almost no notes in common, C major and C sharp major are actually going to sound almost identical. The only difference is C sharp major is slightly higher, just a half step higher. But overall, the sound character is going to be exactly the same because they're both major. And then if you think, well, the only reason that they sound mostly the same is they're only a half step apart, let's compare C major and G major. If you play something in C major versus G major, that also is going to sound in character very similar. And we all more or less implicitly understand this. We know that a song that is in a major key has a general sound character to it. Certainly there's a lot of variety that can be had within a major key, but we understand that let's say we're covering a song by one of our favorite artists and that song is in G major, but maybe that's a little too high for us to sing. We understand we can transpose that into F major and it will sound exactly the same. The only difference is it's a little bit lower, even though F major is very, very different than G major. So if we put all of this together, it seems that really the subset of notes is, if anything, maybe way less important than what note is treated as the tonic. Because even though C major and C sharp major share almost no notes in common, and C major to G major is a pretty significant pitch leap. It's actually a fifth apart. But ultimately, because they're all major, they end up having almost the exact same sound character. But if we keep the exact same subset of notes, taking C major again, and simply change what note we treat as the tonic, all of a sudden it sounds completely different. So overall, why is the tonic so disproportionately important to the sound character of a song? Well, I think it really comes down to it being the center of gravity of the song. The entire song wants to pull to that note. And specifically, what gives different notes being treated as the tonic in the exact same subset of notes such radically different sounds is really the series of steps, the series of intervals that we have coming from the tonic. So if we take major, for example, starting from the tonic, the series of steps we have going up in the scale degrees is whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So from C to D would be a whole step, D to E would be another whole step, E to F is a half step, etc. But then if we take minor, the series of steps we get is actually whole, half, whole, whole, half, whole, whole. And then Phrygian is actually half, whole, 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 half, whole, whole. So ultimately, the sound character that we get is derived from this series of steps that we have, which is going to change based on which note we treat as the tonic. What's the real takeaway here? I think it's simply to understand that subset of notes is not really what gives a key or mode its sound character. It has very little to do with that, but it has much more to do with what note is treated as the tonic, and then what are the series of steps that we have from there. That's ultimately what gives something its character. Yes, the subset of notes is important, especially when playing. You need to understand that if you are playing in E Phrygian, the notes you have are the notes of C major, and they're not completely not important. Obviously, the notes matter, but the notes themselves are not really what gives a song character. It's more which of the notes is treated as the tonic. If this is helpful to you, something else you'll likely find helpful is my free guide on the 4 pillars of music theory that I think every songwriter really needs to understand. We start with intervals because intervals is at the basis of almost everything important in music theory. And then we talk about keys, chords and chord progressions, and chords and chord progressions specifically in context of keys. Because while of course it is important to understand that a C major chord consists of the notes C, E, and G, what's way more important, especially as songwriters, is understanding things like how a G major chord in context of C major is actually operating as a 5 chord, which sounds very different than what a G chord would sound like in G major, because in G major, it would be a 1 chord. And then in D major, a G major chord would actually be a 4 chord. So even though the chord is the same and has the exact same notes, G major, G, B, and D, it has a totally different sound and job depending on what key it's in. So it's more important to understand chords in context of keys than it is to understand chords on their own. So if that seems like it would be helpful to you, be sure to check it out, songwritingtheory.com/music theory guide. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. I'll talk to you in the next one.